Okay, in this video I want to talk about the beginning of section 5.6, and so I'll talk a little bit about the first several paragraphs, some of which I have right here, and then I'll go through an example. Okay, so in this section we get not just a theory of morality, not just Kant's theory of morality, but also a procedure for determining which actions are morally correct and which ones are not. So if we look here, Appia talks about this universalizability principle as a categorical imperative. It is a categorical imperative. So what Kant was proposing was that you ought to do this, and we'll talk a little bit about what this means, but you ought to act only on these maxims. Actually, maybe we should define this word right now. So a maxim is just a general rule. The definition of a maxim is... So a maxim is simply a general rule or principle. So what Kant is saying here is that we ought to act only on the rules or principles that at the same time that we act on them, we should be able to wish or will that they become universal laws of nature. So sometimes this is actually referred to as not just a categorical imperative, but the categorical imperative. In fact, you can see right here, Kant considered it the only categorical imperative, and that's the principle itself is often referred to simply as the categorical imperative. But let's look at how this works. How we would use this principle to determine if a particular action is morally acceptable or not morally acceptable. Okay, so we have to have a situation, which we have here. This person wants to borrow money, and so he considers following this rule. He considers if he So if he takes the loan, then he's going to be unable to pay it back. So is his action, that is taking the loan in the first place, is this action morally acceptable? And so if he acts in this way, he's going to be following this rule here. Given everything he knows, if he takes the loan, he's going to be following the rule, make a promise that you'll never be able to keep, is basically the long and short of it. So our question then is, can we act on this maxim? Can we follow this rule? And at the same time that we do that, can we wish that it would become a universal law of nature? So what do we mean by wishing that an action, or a rule rather, can become a universal law of nature? So remember from the previous chapter, we have here, so if the rule becomes a law of nature, then that would mean that everyone has to follow it, however that might, however it might work out, that it becomes a law of nature. Obviously, we can't just wish things to become a law of nature, but if the maxim became a law of nature, then anyone or everyone who was considering that particular action would have to follow this rule. Okay, and so Kant's conclusion is that no one could reasonably wish for this here to become a law of nature. If it did, then promises would become utterly meaningless. People would just laugh at them, and if no one could ever keep a promise, then promises would not have any utility, would not have any value, and that would create a lot of chaos. Okay, so let's look at another example here. So in this case, we have to first determine what the maxim would be, or actually what the maxims would be. So Anne is deciding what she should do, and so she really has two actions available to her. She's either going to lie or she isn't going to lie. And so the first thing we have to identify, and it'll be easier for me to type this out. The first thing we have to identify is what rule would we use to characterize each of Anne's actions. And so let's say the first one, so the rule that she's following if she does tell the lie is going to be something like lie whenever it's convenient for you. And the rule she would be following if she doesn't tell the lie is simply going to be something like don't lie. Could just be that, or could be something like don't lie. Don't lie even when lying will have some benefit for you. So actually you might notice right off the bat, if you were thinking about what the maxims would be here, that it's not always that easy to figure out how exactly we should characterize the maxim. I mean, we know what the action is. She's either going to tell the lie or not, but there's, for any particular action that we are performing, there's multiple ways to characterize the rule that we might say we're following when we act in that way. So that's a little bit of a problem for Kant's theory, but in any case, we can use these, and we can just think about, could someone reasonably wish for A to become a universal law of nature? So could anyone who is sensible wish that anytime anyone was ever in a position where lying would have some benefit, they would not just have the option of lying, but they would have to lie. They'd be forced to lie because it would be a law of nature. And so that seems pretty unlikely that anyone would reasonably wish for this to become a universal law of nature. Create a lot of chaos, in general, create a lot of problems for humanity. Okay, and then our second one, could we wish for this to become a universal law of nature? Don't lie, either just that or our longer version here. Don't lie even if it will have some benefit for you. Well, certainly we might not want to always have to follow this rule, but it seems like we could reasonably wish for this to become a universal law of nature. Certainly would have a lot of benefits, might have some costs, but it certainly is something that could be desired to be a universal law of nature. So consequently, this is the rule that Anne should follow. Her action should be consistent with this rule, and she shouldn't tell a lie. That's according to Kant, according to the universalizability principle, that's the moral thing to do.